welcome to Night Clerk Radio, episode 90, where we are heading into fall with some easy listening vaporwave, which is a very silly term, very silly genre term. But it turns out not so silly, because one of the albums, one of the artists actually does tag their albums as that, which I didn't realize at the time. So this is probably our first episode, hopefully of many, but you never know, that are inspired by artists we found or really enjoyed on the Vaporwave Up and Comers 2023, which we did a couple episodes ago. And there is a block in the middle that featured two of these artists and some other, it was all this kind of late night lo-fi.
Yeah.
And I sort of jokingly called it at the time, easy listening vaporwave, which is just silly because like outside of maybe like vapor trap or like winter quilts,
hard vapor. Yeah.
Hard vapor. Yeah. Like vaporwave is probably mostly thought of as easy listening. It certainly largely samples easy listening music. So I thought that was a fun way to describe it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you call future funk. Like, is EDM-ish type music easy listening? That's sort of like...
Is that vaporwave, though?
Yeah, well, I consider future funk vaporwave.
I don't know. Maybe that's a whole fight.
Oh, my God.
I'm sure that somebody out there has had this fight. I think there's some good like vaporwave copypastas about like future funk not really being vaporwave. Very silly. Internet. It's a very silly place.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. But otherwise, like, yeah, we just picked from that block some artists we enjoyed. So I don't know if you have... a lot of thoughts on like easy listening vaporwave.
Yeah,
like,
well, late night lo-fi, like
as a whole, like late night lo-fi as a whole. Yeah,
it is really interesting to see the gradual like evolution of vaporwave subgenres and tags and genre names as people, I think, are beginning to drift away from just the blanket term vaporwave to describe all these different types of music because, you know, is Blank Banshee the same as, you know, like Vectroid in terms of like, you know, Floral Shop Macintosh Plus and Echo Jams. And like, even in the early, there's like very distinct sounding music that you wouldn't necessarily categorize together, but they all kind of did. And now people are beginning to like, well, it's also sort of again, genre names are marketing terms, right? So people are beginning to like create new genre names in order to like, oh, look, I've heard vaporwave, Macintosh Plus, blah, blah, blah. Who cares? But wait, have you heard of late night lo-fi? It's like lo-fi, but late night. And lo-fi hip hop, of course, is very popular right now. And so people are like, oh, late night lo-fi, that sounds great. Let me listen. Oh, this is great. This is, you know, even though it has... You can trace the lineage, right, of late night lo-fi from, you know, the first wave of vaporwave. So I like seeing all these new subgenres and creations of vaporwave and these new distinct sounds within it. And so it's the scene is evolving and I'm here for it.
Yeah, I get that. And I think I do think there's like also an interesting evolution sort of aspect to it where a lot of this is the music that we're talking about today is somewhat what I always thought of as vaporwave like 10 years ago. And now it's kind of like its own thing where you have to call it like classic vaporwave, like everything old is new again.
Yeah.
Situation, which is very interesting given the genre's contents in relationship to like memory and nostalgia. Which I thought was pretty funny. But otherwise, yeah, I don't really have a lot to say about late night lo-fi itself, other than it's generally a genre I enjoy. So it's good to have new artists in that realm. Otherwise, I think this is largely just a day where we're just going to talk about music.
Yeah. Unlike all those other days. But yeah, no.
I don't have like a 10-minute like meta spiel about the overall construct of easy. Yeah, like whatever. They're just good albums.
They're just good albums, yeah. And that is a sample from track 9, Burnout, of unattended subdepartment by cinematic sequences. So I like this track in particular because while a general over consistency in this album, there's a lot of variation. Like this track I particularly like because this is like sneaking into an office with a flashlight to do some sleuthing music. And I just love it. You know, a staple of every cop show from the 80s and lots of thriller movies from the maybe late 70s to like mid 80s. And that's where cinematic sequences lives musically as an artist. They're a new artist. I think they just started working this year, and they've put out several tracks that have been in compilations, but Unattended Subdepartment is their first full album, as far as I can tell. Mm-hmm. And the album art is a screenshot from Glengarry Glen Ross of Ed Harris in an office at night. You know, it's raining outside and, and this is kind of like where they live as an artist in terms of like this story, late night vibes, right? And very, feelings of loneliness, isolation, and melancholy. And also just aesthetically, like, that space in cinema where it was all about late night, characters with a lot of turmoil and problems and like, dramatic movies and thrillers and people in offices dealing with some heavy shit. And yeah, I quite like this. It's jazzy in places and like tense in other places and probably very heavily Plunderphonics based. I'm not sure, but it's slightly washed out and lo-fi, of course. But yeah, it's a very interesting album in a lot of ways. It's also like a signal wave album in a lot of ways. It in terms of the technique of like looping like the same thing for like a minute or two. This is a very brief album too. It's like 30 minutes or so. Mm-hmm. And so, I don't want to, I always bring up infinity frequencies, but like it's, it's not bad to be compared to infinity frequencies in my mind.
That's why we have you listen to new music.
Yeah. Damn. Yeah. Well, maybe one day I'll compare infinity frequencies to cinematic sequences. But yeah, I just love that kind of technique of like getting a single loop of music and like creating variations and sort of like playing with it for a few minutes and then moving on. So yeah. Burke, what'd you think?
Yeah, no, I liked it. So I think it's interesting that for your opening sample, you went with sleuthing around. I get it, like with the wah guitar and everything. Mm-hmm. But the like theming of the album, you pointed out the covers from Glengarry Glen Ross, which is about, a bunch of abused real estate salesmen, roughly, basically speaking, and kind of their shitty work condition and all the like infighting and drama and how they're kind of like alienated from each other by this competition for profit and everything. And then you combine that with like the liner notes, which are also about like isolation, doing all-nighters, working all the time, etc. So I really thought of this as more of like a concept album of a person just being stuck in an office all night, basically. Mm-hmm. But it is interesting because I don't know exactly how that works into the set of keys. Like I just sort of imposed that after the fact, but the tracks maybe don't necessarily really in the same way as like a Mawsoft album. It's not meant to be as like explicitly creating an environment.
Yeah.
But I really like a lot of the mood throughout this. So there's a few tracks I called like track 2, I think I said it like NCIS synth horns, like very procedural, which is why at first, I didn't recognize the screenshot at first until I really looked at it, which I thought it was from like a cop film or something. I was like, is this like a police sub department or something that is?
Yeah, no,
it's not. I think it's just like office workers.
Yeah, it's like taking like a still from like a VHS rip of it. Like it's a very low res thing. Like this is not like a high definition like Blu-ray screenshot or anything. It's fuzzy and yeah. No, it's great. Yeah, I do like the really the kind of like slightly cheesy opening of track 2. Like it just yeah. At points it does almost. It also sounds like that style of like fashionable or glamorous or like very high end kind of like 80s music.
Like they're in like a high end business, like they're working all night.
Yeah. That's it.
That's interesting. I don't know. It's a little more run down to me. Like that's sort of the mood I get.
Yeah, it kind of goes. There's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of variation in this short, like track 7, Departmental Desires. I love the track titles for all this. This is all very evocative. It's very sad and contemplative. You know, there's a nice piano and drum roll. And yeah, it's very, you know, you could just loop that for a while you're having a meditation while looking out of a window while training. So
yeah, I think the fun part about this is because last time I listened to it was a couple of days ago, so now I'm trying to decipher my notes, you know, like live on air. And I just read like track 11 taxi ass jams.
Oh yeah, it's very dreamy, very heavy on the lo-fi crackle on that one. Yeah,
a lot of lo-fi, a lot of crackle, but it also, I don't know why, like just maybe because it's a recency bias, because we were talking about it on another Discord, but I was just thinking of like that type of music of like Bob James, who did like the Taxi theme and other kind of like easy listening. You know, Angela, I think, was the theme to Taxi, which is not what's in this, but that sort of like lo-fi, but the like little keys coming in. It was just, I don't know. Just apparently that just caused me to write taxi ass jams.
Yeah.
With a hyphen, taxi hyphen ass jams.
They're and it's like, the thing is cinematic sequences is, you know, obviously an artist is very informed by like cinema soundtracks, movie soundtracks, and that kind of thing. Like they have a thing on their Instagram of a track they did for another album. Anaphora, you know, a Vaporwave homage to the Backrooms, but the Cinematic did a music video for their track on that album, and the track is the music video is just like footage from Night of the Comet, and it's just a character driving around an empty city, and the track's called Empty City. And so like they're really firmly planted, and I think from about the mid 70s to the mid 80s, of this cinema that evokes loneliness and like adult, like in terms of like dealing with adult bullshit, you know, like tracks that are like Copy Machine Dreams and External Disturbances and, you know, Caffeine Booster and Conference, 7:30 Conference. There's a whole time in movie and TV where like, oh, we're adults being adults and dealing with all the serious things of being a professional adult in the world. And, you know, like they weren't catering to kids or fantasy fans or sci-fi or, you know, genre fans as much. And yeah, that was like a whole thing back then. And it's not as prevalent as it is today. So yeah, it's just kind of like, we're just going to have dramas and they're just going to be about people in offices dealing with some bullshit, and that's it. Like, it's very low budget. You know, we're gonna have great actors, but not much else. You know.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Because I did write for a lot of these tracks that they sound very procedural in the genre, not procedurally generated, of course, which I guess means something else now. They feel like drama shows, quite frankly. I think the one that really made it stand out to me was track 13, which is Dazed and Awake. And maybe it samples a theme that was used, but it does sound like I would see shots of people walking through the hall or like out and about in the town. Like if it's a cop show, I mean, I'm kind of locked in the office mode because of the other aspects of the album. But yeah, very, very procedural. Another thing musically, and really, I think this is both albums. I think one of the things I really like about the production element of this late night lo-fi, easy listening vaporwave, there's a lot of like great bass samples or like bass pieces. So like track 3, Copy Machine Dreams, like that intro, like bass under the horns and stuff. Just stands out
that's the most vibe I was getting for it. He was very upbeat than the previous. Well, you know, as compared to the first 2 tracks. Yeah. I like the clapping build up. It's really cool too.
Yeah, I think in general I liked a lot of the back and forth in these tracks where like some would be more upbeat and funky. I think one I also called like coffee getting funk, like trying to stay awake, my guitar. A lot of guitar stings. Track 12 had like a lot of like, I'm a sucker for guitar stings. And then another thing I liked about both these albums, which we haven't talked about the second one yet, I guess, but I think they both have great closer tracks, which is like, you know, and this one's track 15, Still Can't Sleep, but like both have like fairly moody or melancholy outro tracks. Like it leaves the story of the album very unresolved in some sense. Like it's not like a triumphant end. It's like, fuck, I gotta go. It's only Thursday. I pulled it all night on Thursday. I gotta work tomorrow.
In fact, why don't we listen to that? Yeah, and that's sort of like towards the later on in the song where it sort of transitions into a more ambient track, which I thought was a really cool section of the track. Yeah, I think the thing is, talking about like what the movies and TV shows this artist is referencing, it's also the music is more subdued and I guess more, like I don't want to say intellectual, but kind of like, a average person's idea of what intellectual things, like, oh, this is adult things. We should have adult music, a very sophisticated and, but like it's more subdued, I think, in terms of its energy. It's more world weary than you would hear in soundtracks for TV shows and music or movies today. Like everything's way more orchestral and bombastic or like electronic,
Yeah.
9-Inch Nails.
You either have the money.
Yeah.
You either have the money for the big orchestration or you get a guy down the street with the synth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you don't hear this, like we got a jazz band and a composer to make some, like something cool and like appropriate for late nights and rainy nights and confessing your feelings to the, the person that you're married to other people, but you're in love with them, but they're getting a promotion and they're moving away and you're like, like you're going to throw it all away for that one night of passion, that kind of thing. Yeah. Or figuring out what that the company's, dumping toxic pollution in a small town and it's a big scandal and they're going to kill you for it.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Well, that's what the sleuthing track is about,
Obviously. Yeah. It has to be that. I mean,
a very special Columbo episode.
Ooh, I like Columbo.
Yeah. Columbo's great. So yeah, a lot of these tracks would be appropriate for a Columbo episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, no, this is a really, like I said, it's a short album. It's really nice. It's a really great just to put on, to listen to vibe, on those rainy nights where you're working late.
That was from track 6, Along the Way, from our second album, Secrets of the Night by Notorious Secret. This album is listed as part 2 of 4 of the Sophia tetralogy. I almost said quadrilogy because I'm so used to Alien. Sorry, Notorious. But yeah, so this is part 2. Part 1 was Pure Lust, which came out around this time last year. I want to say fall last year. And overall, yeah, Notorious Secret, self-listed as a guy from Canada who makes vaporwave. First released Lost Light, also around this time last year, summer. That was like summer and Pure Lust was fall. There's some other albums in between there, but this is part 2 of the Sophia tetralogy, like I said. And I think they also just had an album come out like a week or 2 ago. It was very recent. It was too recent, unfortunately, to do it for this episode instead. So I went with Secrets of the Night as my choice. And yeah, so this album is thematically interesting coming off of your album, because your album is like isolation and loneliness through work. And this in some sense feels like failed relationship loneliness type, or like longing for some sort of relationship type. So it's like the other aspect of something that can make you not feel great. Or
yeah, no, it's like Vaporwave by Wave by like R&B, right? Like it's more connected to that. Yeah, rhythms and blues. So yeah, I can totally see that.
Again, if you go by the track titles like we did for yours, it just has like Afterglow, Memories of You, Old Flame, Late Night in Seattle, Never Let You Go. So clearly themed.
Yeah, no joke. Yeah, and that's on the other side. Like, there's also like the whole like Cinemax / Skinemax. Am I right? Late night and like
Oh my God.
yeah, oh my God, and all those, of course, erotic thrillers which were popular in the 80s and 90s. That someone's going to get murdered, but someone's going to have some sexy times and then get murdered, or maybe not. Who's to say? Horror movies, but for respectable people who wouldn't be caught dead watching a horror movie. So, but the same kind of like sex and violence impulses. But yeah, this is the kind of soundtrack you'd have for this, or just, you know, a torrid affair movie, you know. Yeah, still kind of cinematic, but yeah, it's a very different feel. Even though they're both like late night lo-fi / easy listening vaporwave, they still have very distinct feels.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for using my terminology.
Yeah.
Notorious Secret does have some albums tagged as easy listening, which I liked, which is why I felt vindicated in calling this easy listening. Pure Lust, which is Sophia Part 1, is tagged as easy listening. So I feel vindicated in my terminology.
You should.
Artist supported. I do. Yeah. No, I agree though. I think to clarify my earlier point, what I really thought was that both albums are very like melancholy and about being trapped.
Oh.
But one person's trapped in a job and the other person's maybe trapped in memories of a relationship, which can be very, very crippling too. If you have trouble moving on or moving past something, that can also be paralyzing as much as being trapped in an office. Very different ways, very different reasons, very different and whatever. But like they're both albums about being like trapped by something external. We'll talk real quick about like production elements of this album, because I really liked a lot of what is on this album. So as with cinematic sequences, a lot of like really great bass, like almost immediately on track 1, which I said has PSA vibes, which is a compliment. PSA is like great music. It's like, there's just like this swelling incoming synth. And then there's just this like really, it's like, and I always don't want to describe stuff, but it's like kind of like mid heavy bass. It's more like trebly bass. It's not like real deep and boomy.
It's very lush. Yeah.
Yeah. It's lush. Like it's a little different in the mix than like funk bass or something. And just all these little production elements over it. I assume it's the processing to the sample or added, but like, I love that big reverby snare in track 2, that big, huge, just give me like big, huge backbeat.
Oh yeah.
Which also comes up in track 4. Lost Star also has a lot of like great, big bass and drums, which I really like. I think that sort of production, either through the choice of samples and then whatever they do to it after the fact, is one of the things that really brings me to this genre. One of the things I really like musically just about it. So when people do a really good job with those aspects of the production, I'm really sucked in. And then like, yeah, I think the mood and the melancholiness kind of brings in, because it brings a lot of like musical elements I really like are sort of parts of that. So, you know, there's like big moody sax on track 9, Late Night in Seattle. And I'm kind of running through these, but like, there's just a lot. I'm just trying to cover a lot because there's a lot I really liked on this album, and I want to make sure I don't leave anything out. So what did you think of it though?
I mean, like track 9, I love the sax opening. It's just like, hell yeah, we got big sax. Yeah. You know, there's a lot of really good guitar in this too. Like, you know, just electric and acoustic, I think. Yeah, no, there's like, it gets, track 8, like Old Flame, it gets, oh yeah, we got the sexy guitar, 2 minutes in. Oh yeah, this is the Cinemax one. And there's like some like woodwind or flute in this, some of the tracks, I think, like track 10, which is really fun. And yeah, no, I do agree with your overall, like, cinematic sequence is about like work or procedural things. And this is about like, you know, passionate affair, you know, late at night and thinking about that. So it totally tracks in. So I want to say like, yeah, track 7, Change, especially, like, has a really good build up in the first minute. And then you get that saxophone. I love a good saxophone. It just comes together all in the last minute of the track. Yeah, it's just really fun. Hell yeah. This is I'm going to have a torrid affair that's going to ruin my life, but it's going to be great. I'm hooked on that person. And someone's got a revolver and it's going to get shot in the last act, you know, and who knows?
We do not condone ruining your life via affairs.
Okay.
Nor murdering people as part of your affairs.
Yes, but what if we could?
But what if we did?
If he was just out of the way, we could be together.
But if I needed a soundtrack for it,
yeah. Oh yeah.
If it were to happen, you know, I'm not saying I'd do it, but if I needed a soundtrack for it, I might put on this one because it's really fucking good. Yeah, I think track 7 is an interesting one that you mentioned, because that was sort of where I left my note about like, oh, these are really both about like both albums are really about like melancholy and being trapped.
Mm-hmm.
So let me play a second sample of some more production elements I really like.
Mm-hmm.
So this is track 12, Awaken. And I always take note of tracks that have some interesting element that kind of breaks me out, because sort of the listening approach that I take for these episodes is, you do like an active listen and then a few passive listens. Like I'll be working and I'll leave it on and I make notes of interesting things that like break me out of what I'm doing, because I really like them, or they, and that's how I know it's like, oh, that's a really good part of that album. And I couldn't tell you why. I don't know if it's attached to some core memory, but that opening fade isn't just a fade in of the sample into like this episode. It's actually that opening fade of the track, like the first few seconds of that track. And I don't know why. I just really love that synth that comes in. I think there's a lot of like, it's not as moody maybe as other parts until like towards the end of the track, like that stuff. But that like opening synth swell like really stood out to me for some reason. And then the rest of the track has like great bass and production throughout.
It's very light. It's very like airy, like it's very, I think of like, rooms filled with crystals or something like that. It's, like whenever they're doing the love scene, it's always like them turn into this fantasy dream scene where they're like in a crystal palace or something dumb like that. So like, or he's dreaming of her or something like that. Yeah, no, I really like that too. I'm kind of curious. Do you do the active listen first, or do you do the passive listen? I will
active.
You do the active first. See, I do the passive first. I listen to it passively first. And if there's any tracks that like grab at me in the first passive listen, I'll make note of those. But then after I've listened to each album at least once or twice, then I'll do the active listen. But yeah, no, that's really interesting. Different approach. But yeah, no, definitely like any track that like grabs my attention while I'm just doing a passive listen is definitely like a highlight of the album for me. Because like, what's going on here? This is though,
I guess I have to be honest. I guess technically I do the passive first, because there's like a selection period before we pick what, there's always like a few days where we pick out what albums we do. And when I'm doing that, I do listen to them passively to see if they're interesting to me. Like if they grab my attention, because, this is really a show about talking about stuff we like. Like I don't want to talk about albums I hate. Obviously, like I'm not trying to do like reviews. This isn't like poor, low energy, 3 out of 5 is not the goal. So I guess there's like a first passive listen to see what I like. And, if I picked an album, like, I picked this one, is because it does have a fair number of bits that interested me even in casual listening. But then I do an active as my first, like once it's selected. So I guess it's not so different. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the other sort of last thing to mention is that I really, as I said on the first album, I said this album also had a strong outro track, and I really like Void Moon, which is track 14, kind of the last track on the album. And it's going to be the outro sample. So it'll be the sample heading into the outro. So if you want to hear it, but again, I love that both albums just end on these like moody, unresolved buildups. Like kind of like really track 13 and 14 are both just very somber, very moody, but like Void Moon just has like, just guitar going on. It's very, I just really like that. I'm totally drawing a blank on sounds like what it is. That's an inside joke.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess I paused for a second because I was trying to remember if it was like guitar or saxophone that was playing under, and I think it's guitar. I guess I could just listen right now real quick. But anyway, yeah, there's just that, like, it's just really somber. And again, the word I keep using is unresolved. And I think that's so much more interesting than some like very finalizing outro track.
Yeah. I agree.
So both these albums, I guess, final word, both albums are great. Definitely check them out. Definitely both deserve to be on that Up and Comers. So I'm glad I got to use it as an excuse to listen to this or talk about it and share it, because I had known of Notorious Secret because they did a really cool charity set back there's a big live stream back in, I think, March called Vapor Shave, which was, I think it's connected to a leukemia charity. And they did a set with Solodolo 84, which is on YouTube, and I'll put a link to it in the story description. So it's cool to like really dig into and be able to share their music on the show for both of these artists. Thank you so much for listening. I hope we've inspired you to go check out these two albums by two great up and coming artists and enjoy a little easy listening vaporwave. And hopefully by the time this comes out, it has cooled down, because it's not cool at the time of recording. Next episode, we're going to be heading into the spooky season, I guess, apparently, with Hearts of Space. Now, this is something that came up a while ago where you were reminded of it from some other media we were consuming. I guess apparently you had listened to this a lot. I was completely unaware of it even existing.
Yeah.
So we're going to get into that and maybe some other haunted similar media of the time and talk about that.
Yeah. No, Hearts of Space has been on. I mean, it's still going on, which has impressed me. It's been going on since I was, like a kid, before. It's been around for a long ass time, and it's still going. And they just out there on public radio stations late at night, blasting out weird ass spacey ambient music, all across the country. So,
yeah. So I think that'll be fun to dig into. If you like this episode, you like what we do, be great to check out our Patreon, Night Clerk Radio at patreon.com. We have 30 some bonus episodes and other rewards, great Discord community for you to join and chat with other people about all this stuff and beyond. You can also find us at Night Clerk Radio on Twitter, wherever, Blue Sky, Instagram, Facebook. If you pick somewhere and search for Night Clerk Radio, you'll probably find us. So wherever you do choose to interact with us, if it has a way for you to tell the algorithm that you liked it, either a rate, a review, a like, that really helps out. We also always advocate building community, talking to other people about what you like. And we hope that the music we talk about or the show itself is on that list. So once again, thank you all for listening and supporting, and we will talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.